my fear was that I would not be aware of a major oversight to the chapters. And that was the case. I was not fully aware of how important it was for our chapters to be in compliance with their insurance. I was not fully updated of how important it was for the chapters to be fully staffed. The green are the areas that were prior to 2019. There were just a few of these components that were just barely touched upon prior to 2019. The pink are the areas that we are fully implementing in 2019. And that's not to disrespect in any way the efforts from SPPS, but they have individually touched upon those areas on a smaller scale in their respective areas. But now, moving forward in 2019, these are all the areas ASC will now fully implement uniformly. And that led to my recent ASC leadership change. And you have to understand that if there is a leadership change at ASC or DCD, it's not so much my decision. I believe it's a decision that the individual makes on their own. And I say this to staff, and I want to reiterate this to RDC, that if you're going to work for community development, you should be engaged with the community. And so I want to frame our conversation in those regards, and this will be available to you. Yeah, we can make copies of everything here. So if Chairman Nez, if I can introduce rural addressing and IT to give a quick update on their departments, and they'll be excusing themselves as they have other meetings, and then we can move into more of the discussions and another update from CPMD, CHID, and then we can get to the meat of the sanctions and cap efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowman. Go ahead, Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Nez also.
Ja, der bin ich nan da. Check the chin is le, to the chin bas chin. Trapanast, eje da che got na chin da shinal. Ako to died nanchle. Ko alt is on ya shahan hallo. Ako the addressing authority hit it ninigi J ha and the nasilwal it's continuous. If all the 110 chapters have been fully addressed today as we sit here, we still would have to do updates. It's a continuous task. Beso hahin tehgi aja ICG go budget diniti an nahabike. Ado the onal ingot odskil go biget it lad go about 10,600,000 points. 10,600 points. That's how many addressable structures we have. If we only look at the Coconino County portion of Navajo Nation, we're probably looking at about 31,800 points for just the Arizona side. It takes a while to actually establish a physical address. Plus code late AI.dps bebetlin dahasilna alcohol. That's a special technology that was invented in Switzerland a few years ago. Yeah, that ni chapters on lini bich nascodelia. Akudishji de be da inish alcohol akhida begin a pansa ni no tlich bin ye nach nilja iya nilja irako jo kwage bebeka nelu we're actually using the plus code at this time. Ako eben nache in le Utah the Navajo voters in Utah hot bebeka what Asian ben nache that's it. Look, we have two commissioners over there in San Juan County, Utah. Ako ilo nakaba na sindalil. Ako ko ado a kwije nihilya kage nihik ein linigi driver's license into the ID into the vehicle registration aja hun teje bin yenal sosin ye hata ka a kwije hot ego ba state Nielsen nle ado the states and the counties and other agencies ha bilta inisha hot abin nache nasco holdishnle as part of that we have to get right-of-way clearance to install signs. Beda inish ako ndol nishigi labor bedi nini che holland eya ako ibeso bahalon hot ade an nas tskil ko holjish lingle ado and da inishigi e an nasilwal ado ibn nache from Division of Community Development. We're also assigned to work with other agencies like U.S. Census. This coming Sunday,
Good morning, members of the RDC committee, Mr. Chair, and Jay, I just want to also do a quick overview of the IT section at DCD. Right now we have, there's only two of us. There's myself, I'm the IT manager, and then we have another person, Sylvia Jordan, who's our principal IT technician, and the two of us, we're responsible for providing computer equipment and software support to the chapters. We do a lot of remote support, using remote access tools like GoToAssist and some other things because it's a lot faster, easier to just use remote support instead of driving out there to all the chapters. But when there's a problem with the internet, or if there's a problem with the computer itself, that needs in-person visit, we do that too. But most of these problems can be fixed, remotely. So we try to use that as much as possible because it allows us to help more chapters faster. And then we also help provide support with broadband and with networking, and then we also provide computer software and hardware specifications when chapters request that. When they're buying new computers, they usually come to us and want to know what kind of computers, software to buy. We also provide support on the wind system application, and we also provide support on the Google apps platform that Division of Community Development uses. That extends out to the chapters, and so it's all the accounts, all the applications that exist under that platform. We also provide monthly chapter trainings to the chapters on Google Apps, Google Sites, the chapter websites, how to update those websites, and the WIN system. And then we provide the accounts for the chapters, for email and their websites. So we maintain those. When people forget their passwords or when they can't log in, we help out with those. So just really briefly, that's what we do. And then I wanted to go over some of the current projects that we're working on. So right now we're working with the cyber team. Well, I'm working with the cyber team to try to get a broadband plan for the Navajo Nation. And I presented on behalf of the cyber team to RDC a couple weeks ago on some of the things that we're working on. And at that time, RDC gave the cyber team an assignment to come up with some legislation based on our recommendations. And I've been working on those and drafting some legislation per RDC's request. And I presented those to Delegate Begay, a draft copy a couple days ago, and now I'm going to be meeting with Legislative Council to try to get those finalized and try to get those before RDC soon. And then we're also working on a report for the NABI committee based on that legislation, NABI MY-26-19. It's coming up at the end of this month. So we're busy working on that. And I also, I've helped the cyber team to procure the services of a broadband consultant to help us put the Navajo Nation broadband plan together. And we also hired an E-rate consultant to help us work out the details with getting E-rate, the subsidies, for E-rate available for the chapters. So those are some of the things we're working on. And then we, in-house with DCD, we've recently hired a consultant to help us put together a 5-year technology plan. Right now we're doing assessments of all our IT within the division and at the chapters. Next steps will be to create a needs assessment report, and then the 5-year technology plan will follow. That will help us to really structure, the way that purchases are being done. We'll develop an acquisition plan. Right now, all the departments, all the chapters, basically just purchase whatever they want, whenever they want, without a lot of planning or thought put into it. But we're going to try to standardize a lot of those to help save some money, to enable better support for these items, and to just to spend more wisely when we buy these kind of software and equipment. And then we've been working with MC on some updates to the rural addressing system that he uses. There's going to be a tracking component that's going to be available. Right now it's in the development process, and it's finishing up, and it'll be going into testing pretty soon. So just some accomplishments. Like I said, I've been working with the cyber team, really helping them out on all the goals of that team with the broadband assessments and out there at the chapter level. I also mentioned that we got the broadband and E-rate consultant on board. We do a monthly newsletter, at DCD, and I coordinate that and get those out every month. In fact, I need to get the current months out pretty soon. Like I mentioned earlier, we do monthly chapter trainings on Google and Wind and websites. And then I've been helping the Census. I'm the designated Census liaison for the Navajo Nation, so I've been working closely with the Census Bureau and helping out with getting a census office established over by the fairgrounds. That one's the work on that is they're building out the insides of that, the offices, setting those up, and it should be open pretty soon. We're also, I also help get the complete count commission, established within the Navajo Nation. It wasn't done in 2010, but now we have one for 2020, which should help raise awareness out there at the chapter level, and to help create a more complete count, for 2020. And I've been helping out with the Census Bureau, setting up the census consultation sessions, with the Navajo Nation. So, like MC mentioned earlier, there's one that's coming up on the 20th of October over in Albuquerque. So, finally, we face some challenges. Like I mentioned, there's only two of us, so we need more IT staff. Two people isn't quite enough to adequately provide the support and attention that all the chapters need. We need a faster, cheaper internet access at all 110 chapters. So, right now, the chapters are getting price gouged, by all these broadband providers. So we're working on, with the cyber team to try to get solutions to those issues. And then, I also believe that the Navajo Nation is not investing enough into IT, on the Navajo Nation. We did a study a couple years back that the Navajo Nation only invests less than 1% of the total budget into IT. When you compare that with like the federal government invests 7% of their entire budget into IT. We took a look at NAU to see how much they invest into IT, and they said about 5%. So these guys are investing quite a bit into IT, and that's probably the reason why we're falling so far behind in IT on the Navajo Nation. And then when you look at many businesses out there, they're investing 10, 20% of their entire budgets into IT because they rely on IT in the current the modern economy. So just wanted to share that information. That'll be all for my presentation. Thanks.
Honorable members of RDC, do you have any questions for Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Nez here? And although we have Honorable Thomas Walker here with us today, Yate Pensionant, I'll go to Honorable Begay and then Honorable Stewart.
Good morning, Nandolik. Ms. Yellowman, Ado Division Community Development staff from Sinigan also. Good morning. Kadon Hitcha present Aliagi. Rule addressing, Ms. Yellowman, the office. I like to see, and I like to request specifically the limited staffing, the funding, and the resource. And I know some of your staff are also working with the 2020 census count, and then the cyber team, FirstNet, and I know they're being stretched thin in working on certain specific projects, specifically for the chapter level. Although rule addressing, I'm kind of beginning to realize is that it's not really moving forward just because a lot of the Navajo people themselves don't want to be identified of where they're living. Could we, is it possible to change the purpose rather than trying to rely on the people to come forward to identify which road they live on? But could we move forward in working directly with, it's probably NDOT though, NDOT, BIA, and counties to you better attain and then the state right of way, to ADOT, to New Mexico, Chigi, so those are the three main source. Could we go forward and just start utilizing those roads? A big aho yisi tata iti tiniki a have the chapter. This goes back to the question: where does the chapter officials play a big role in this rule addressing? The grazing official, especially the Club C members, although the CSC and AMS. So did I see and then of course ourselves in here, response anit linigi. Elachit added here on a daily basis. If you go to any chapter meeting, my chapter, I mean, the one thing that they continue to just have, a transferring budget, doing certain thing with funding, or just trying to wait for chapter to sign off on resolution, or like just right now, I have my Low Mountain chapters have their chapter meeting. They're asking me what's the status on certain amount of funding. Should it know that kodo text should al it just should a koko halate out dik at rule addressing niki. Could we just go out and start labeling these roads ado yego tatai di tiniki in those area? We'll give maybe there a choice of our community members. Okay, these are the main road. You on here the name it at the no go that way they'll just reference a main exit road. Like if they choose to name this particular road something, but the nation has or the overall of the Atiniki in his backwards ako kwake what ko ko tahtil te ko speak sen because the net so you're talking about 100 almost 200,000 people has to go to your office to apply and say, but how much of these Navajo people don't want to identify where they live? So that way we can call in NDOT, BIA, and counties and the state right-of-ways, the state right-of-way, like for Arizona Department of Transportation, and we're meeting with them next weekend, the 26th, down in Phoenix. State right-of-way, I don't know, right now we just kind of use between mile posts, this and that, we'll give a chapter maybe 1 year to name but I need an input recommendation from the office. But in order for that to happen, who will really how many people is needed that will really focus on getting this done? And I like for recommend RDC to push this as one of our priority, getting exact address for the whole Navajo Nation, rather than just trying to encourage people to come into verifying their physical address. And again, once that's in place, of course, this first responder, they'll just begin to pinpointing to where this particular location is coming from, or the people that calls in for the 911. That's it. I'm not asking them to get a response, but ponder on this particular request see what the response is. Committee, I don't know where we could look for additional funding if there needs to be done, or how would ASC at each of the agency level be able to pick up another task in getting these done. I mean, all based o audit a ban hasina ba or the akwade a yisin latte the nabakite or wasanki den. So we're just spending too much time that got like what 2020 budget han hitch a hodna the halan hitch a hota hle ado special meeting ba to le no aj that opa ba all the hakwa so di yisikin la te na hot nda has te ki to yego beta inishta hot be national so ere ya kodo Mr. Yellman Dr. Yellman did kodo I would like to hear, more in-depth plan of how the rule addressing could be modified, how much funding would be needed to implement this further, and then how can we have the chapter officials to really do their part at the local level. So the community land use plan, other community land use plans that certify in daily. So what additional or certify but after the following day, the project big ya they kidney kaya the opasana hot long the auto tahnata hit no yasana the hot so what's our purpose of even certifying it on these community land use plan, knowing that a few people had approved it, but the main people that were opposing certain areas weren't involved. Part of the discussion. So, certifying these community land use plan, how do we just modify the intent of it? Maybe rule address in order to get certified. You got to have these rule addressing to be developed, but don't need that's a big although requiring them to really have like the solid waste plan in place, have the cemetery to be in place, and so on. AIC required that's it. Committee certified a business site list overall division economic development plan of operation revised so what that hakish the rule address in the ani hajo holia hajo kitchen nano amponet zado listen so it is just zero kodo recommend start chair.
Honorable Stewart.
Oh, Shania, Nana, Arunda Shajayaja, Arshmayaja Kiaro Kodo, CDC, DCD staff, Lucky, Dr. Yellowman, and your crew. Rule addressing, Mr. Baldwin, rule addressing in previous years. I was the chapter president for Fort Defiance. You had come by at one of those times to present to us and to tell us, that there was a amount already completed. Update that I know for a fact that to this day it still isn't done, and chapter officials in Fort Defiance, they're really questioning what is, like Shania said, what is the CLUPC committee doing? What are they doing? And I know that they've received training. I know that they've gotten technical assistance from the program, and I want to know what else can be done with these chapters and these committees, these officials that just kind of push it off to the side. What needs to be done is, I know that in sitting here, listening and running through my mind what I've been hearing the past year or even longer is, what can we do? I know that with the U.S. Postal Service, every year you have to renew your box, and you take in an NTA bill, something verifying where you live. Is there a way that we can do that too with this, just to bring it, to get as many more individuals put on the grid, I guess is what we would call it, and then what else can be done at these chapters? Because I'm also hearing that, it's not only the chapters or the staff, but it's also the communication and the way that you present yourself at the chapters, where you assume that they are tech savvy, and quite honestly, they aren't. And I want to know, is that the way that other chapters perceive you as well? For myself, I've been I've known the computer, but I've never really seen this map within 45. So I know that Sawmill, I'm really proud of Sawmill, because Sawmill has really moved forward on theirs. I mean, and being for a community that's up in the hills and whatnot. I mean, this past winter they really proved themselves by showing me on the emergency plan how many community members. So I know that the teaching is there, the technology is there. And so that's why I'm asking, is it the individuals themselves that aren't wanting to be taught? And then how can we, like Shana said, how can we as delegates, how can we assist, and what can we do with the program? And then how many staff? I know that it's been a number of years that you've been working with the rural addressing. And I know that, is it the staff? Do we need to put unmet needs in there for staff? I mean, per agency? I mean, because I know that the ASCs, I mean, shoot, they're bogged down too. I mean, I barely get a chance to see Miss B. Gay, and I try to go catch her every time I can. And I know that she has like 18 of the chapters under her wing too, that she's trying to salvage and keep afloat and keep them going. And so, these are some other things, that I want to ask about, is how can we get these things done? Is there is this another legislation or policy that needs to be revised and updated? I've already met with the ASCs way back, and I know that one's being revised, waiting for that one to come up before us too, so what about this one? Is this in that area too? Do we need to do that with this one as well? How can we as delegates get these chapters to do what needs to be done? Because it is a need out there. I see it for emergency services, emergency management services, and our police departments as well. And I know that it's just our elders that don't really, like Shana said, they don't want to give out their addresses. They don't want to let people know where they live. But it's a need. We're in that time of age now where it has to be done. So these are just some thoughts, some statements, and some questions that I have, all wrapped up in one. Question I.
Mr. Baldwin?
Heshnanta. Tida naida kidigi. There are a number of times that I invited the council delegates to our 7-hour training. Or you can just sit down with me and I can go through the process. We have a 7-hour training. That's where we train the chapters. Mr. Brigade, that process is not working very well because, again, it's the council that set down these standards. And then I shared this information with DOJ too. All the 110 chapters passed resolution to support their E911 efforts. Those are all posted on the website. We have to reach out to the chapters. LRAC, Local Rural Addressing Committee, they get training. They do the field work, the groundwork. And we introduce them to the mapping tool. Tech savvy. It's a platform that the chapters have access to through the internet access. That way they don't have to run around with GPS units or other devices which requires additional training. So we try to set this up in such a way that they can help when it's not working, because when you train someone, they disappear and you don't hear from them again. I really don't have much control. And I mentioned this before too, I don't wear a badge where I can really work and try to get something done. If someone tells me that they don't want a physical address, there's not much I can do about that. It's the standards that we're working with. So what we can do is I can work with, I mentioned this to a few times in our staff meeting, and then now that we have a chapter section from DOJ, we're preparing documents to share with them, that if there's a way we can amend the standards, because right now we're relying on the chapters and we're saying it's a shared responsibility that we have to do this, but it's not working. Maybe we need to take that away or revise it in such a way that they can help us, but we can do most of the work. Again, we need that staff support in-house to do that part. I only have 2 other staff that stay in the office, and right now I'm really the only one working with the chapters. In those counties, those state, in fact, I mentioned this in my report, we have to obtain BIA right away before we can install signs, so we are working with them. But those are official roads. It's the roads that are out in the rural areas that we need to name. We need to establish what I call backbones for that. We have to identify it officially so that we can address folks off of that. And we have standards that speak to that. So a lot of this we're already doing. It's just that we need to beef up our efforts. We should have a rural addressing office in each agency to get this done. But I am willing to prepare something. We need, at the beginning, one time I was talking about this, and I think I threw out the number $58.5 million to get us started to really get serious about what we need to do, the Shenanigans. And that would be something we can do over time. That includes establishing offices at other ASC regional offices. And at the beginning, when I first got this job, I actually asked for 110 positions. That way I can train these folks and send them out to individual chapters. But if we could do something, entertain something like that again, I think that would really help me. That way I don't have to rely on the CLUP committee members, because in the standards, that's what it says. So I can share the standards with you, and it needs a lot of revision, because in those standards there's still places where the letters LGSC still needs to be amended. What else can we do? Postal Service, on the outside, if someone needs a utility service connection, they are required to get a document from the rural addressing office, but we don't do that over here. Although, one thing to note about this is that when I was hired by Division of General Services under NNTU, Telecommunications and Utilities, I-911 office in Kitano. When FY10 came around, we went under the umbrella of DCD. we came over with 2 or 3 staff. It on the alcohol. This division of Department of Transportation was under DCD, but they moved and created their own division. Plan of operation, yeah, they were included to help us. They amended their plan of operation. We were totally left out of that. So to this day, they don't really have to help us in that. In addition to this, we included some language in Title 26 so that it speaks to the rule adjusting activities. And if you're going to be certified, one of the conditions would be that you do your rule adjusting. Because that language was removed before it was actually approved, and I never found out why that was removed to begin with. But for the next session, we certainly can prepare something more of a detailed operational suggestions, and this is what we can do, kind of a report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Stewart, and then Honorable Begay.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. One thing, when you were talking about the training, I know that with the grazing officials, they have that training that they're going through now with as far as finding out who and where there are grazing permits and agricultural plots and whatnot. Is there a way to work with the grazing officials too at the chapter levels that have that in their system already as well, to see if there are any out there that are gonna cut back these numbers? I know it's just a training that either they're going through or that they're starting to do as well.
The reason why I'm making recommendation is that we all have this phone data. I don't know if whoever developed this map application, I don't know if they had to go through BIA to get any approval to identify that these roads are on the Navajo Nation. I mean, if somebody has done this without the Navajo Nation approval, I mean, I mean, there's application of a map of the Navajo Nation, and it lists everything. Maybe you work with this particular company, and maybe they have all the resource already, because it identifies a lot of the BIA roads, back roads, the county roads, and so on. All I'm saying is that could we the nation adopt these names that's already on the map and saying that these are the roads that we can start naming them, and who needs to make the recommendation to start naming these roads? I mean, don't mean to start. I mean, I'm not really getting after anybody. I'm just saying is that how is it the current status? But to me, it seems like it's not really getting up to speed and getting things out there. The previous slide indicated that you guys are INDOT is not working with the office. How can they offer their assistance? Or again, if somebody had already mapped out the Navajo Nation, the roads are identified, I mean, why can't we work with them and say, hey, we have to go through BIA, we have to get right of ways. We have to go through counties. No, hot. Additional art in the Hekopito, and the 7-hour training. I mean, is it really necessary to have a 7-hour training? I mean, that to me, I think that's kind of like a lengthy training. I mean, just to do certain things. But again, I'm not trying to but all I'm saying is that maybe that's not really working. How can you make recommendation to have us modify it? Somewhere that it's harder for other incoming administration or delegates to make changes. Because I see his job, baby, Elia Ado, or Yahana Alta, or change in Nail. A cocoa, a cut ago, stop his Aniki Elia, she net sound of this. But anyway, but nonetheless, Dr. Yellerman, could you give us a recommendation how we can move forward and really pressure the local chapter to do their part in getting this rural addressing issue out of the way?
Shananta, we have a few presenters here this morning, and we need to be done by at least 12:15. So, Dr. Yeoman.
Thank you. And thank you, Delegate Stewart, Honorable Stewart, and Delegate Kalen Begay for your questions. Again, I just want to demonstrate or explain that of the departments at DCD, IT and rural addressing have really been put on the back burner. And again, IT, as Mr. Nez shared, they cover every inch of the Navajo Nation, but yet has been very limited in funding in the past and have 2 staff dedicated to doing that. And as you heard also, I fully support the dual efforts on Mr. Nez's part to assist with the complete census count. You'll soon see plan of operation recommendation changes. Rural addressing needs to be a department, and right now, under our current structure, they're part of just the senior staff at DCD. But they need to be, we need to redesign rural addressing so that they are a department. Not to mention the type of service rural addressing provides. They provide one-on-one. We have clients, our community members that come into admin building 2. And it's nice though, they come in and they come into the lobby. So we even need to redesign the services and how we provide services. Again, and I can refer back to some questions to Mr. Begay, Rod Begay, but in order to consider or entertain mandating efforts in rural addressing, if we're going to mandate it, it needs to be funded. I'm not sure about the 58 million, but there is a cost to rural addressing. And let me just share with you, we're just barely scratching the surface of rural addressing. So rural addressing is connected to 911 PSAP. You're probably already familiar with that. And that's public safety access. That's a huge component for our Navajo Nation community members. Rural addressing is also connected to the voice over internet protocol. That means our technology is moving so fast that we need to be ahead of, or at least on the radar of, these technological changes. And that's where rural addressing comes in. Not to mention the Wi-Fi. If we had substandard capability, and this is where IT comes back into too, maybe we could cut not only the traveling, but the training time, as you mentioned, in half, and even provide training via internet, you know? So there's a lot of ways we can reach out to the community, and these two individuals are critical points to delivering that. Also brings up some of the concerns on the taxes to cellular uses. So I recommend back to the original question you had with BIA, IHS, and NDOT, perhaps a work session with rural addressing that will give us time to prepare and share more of a strategic overall plan that includes those other entities, NDOT, BIA, and IHS.
Shananta, we could recommend to have this work session with rural addressing and IT separately, and invite NDOT, BIA, IHS, and other entities. Abigahia. Okay, we'll move on to ASC and then sanctioned chapters. So I know we're going to spend quite a bit of time on that.
And if I could just ask Chid and CPMD to stick around here in case some questions come up. And Ms. Jim Martin and Mr. Jumbo, if you can join me down here. Do you need to be... Do we need to recruit somebody to help you there? Maybe Patricia, if you can help. Yate Nana. I'd like to introduce two key staff that will be presenting information here today. Ms. Jim Martin actually came on board to DCD as a senior planner and has a tremendous amount of background in training, local governance, HR, and consultation to peacemaking. And then most recently was delegated as acting ASC manager in September. And then also to my right is Mr. Robert Jumbo. Mr. Jumbo has many years of auditing background and is also members of various organizations as an auditor, and he can explain just the tremendous background that he has, and comes from the Chinle area as an ASO. So we had to snatch him from Chinle area and assign him to all of the 110 chapters. And you'll clearly see why we did that as he shares all of the data he's been able to gather in the short amount of time that he's been here to present to you. So, Chair, if I can allow them to introduce themselves as well.
Yat e nanash san lots of Jim Martin inishya, and everyone also calls me by my nickname Sunshine. Ado in shlinigi eyat sanabitlin shle al andene abashichin al andene dashnala do ashin dashiche. You see Tutlakaida Nasha Ado Kare DCD Banashnish. I am currently the delegated, as Dr. Yellerman shared, and I am overseeing the administrative service centers for the last month or so But prior to that, as senior planner, I was working directly with Mr. Johnny Johnson to help make improvements on ASC areas. So since I started my employment with DCD, I have been working closely with the ASC staff and doing strategic planning with them.
Good morning, RDC committee members, Mr. Chair. My Shay Robert Dean Jumbo she Yordan Edison, but my just kitchen bus chin tabada chedo this chini the chanela koi come in from Chinley and administrative services officer under special assignment currently to help the cap and sanction chapters. With my years of auditing experience, I've been with the Auditor General before for about 9 years. So I've worked heavily with chapters and quite a bit, just a little bit with programs. So just to give you a little bit of my background, I'm also a certified fraud examiner. So I'm able to do fraud investigations as well if needed. And I'm also seeking another designation called a certified internal auditor. So I'll be earning that hopefully within 3 months here is my goal. So that's my background there.
ASC and Mr. Jumbo have prepared information for you. I'm gonna turn some time over to them and they'll go through the slides. And just to make sure that you have a copy of the presentation as well. We also have Ms. Holgate here as well to answer some questions and provide some information on the chapter budgeting process and fund types as well, and SPPS staff to assist with questions.
I have some slides on the presentation just to do an overview of ASC. And I'd like to begin by first thanking our Honorable Kialan Begay because your questions over the last few months have been really valued. And I've appreciated hearing from you and looking into the concerns that you have shared with us. And so that's the kind of feedback that I appreciate as a leader. So with that, I put together some slides to try to go over some of those concerns or updates. And then I want to leave most of the time to Mr. Jumbo because that'll get to the root of the sanction issues that have been coming up. So the first slide just covers our 2019 progress, some of the key areas that we have been focusing on. One of the parts of that slide I want to share with you is the ASC plan of operation. That has been a big question from many of our delegates, and we are looking at the revisions, but overall tying that to the Division of Community Development's vision and strategic planning. So I'm looking forward to sharing that soon. On the next slide, I want to give you some of the background to what I was able to research and identify in terms of the progress at ASC. If you're not aware, the Administrative Service Center was established in 2016. If you look back, that's not very long. We're still a baby in terms of a department, transitioning from the LGSC into the ASC. We're just new. In 2017, because of the change over to the ASC, there was a lot of organizational restructuring that was happening within the Division of Community Development. I can't speak to a lot of that because I wasn't here, but there were many things that were not able to get off the ground at that time. By August 22nd, 2018, under the 23rd Navajo Nation Council, the RDC approved amendments to the ASC plan of operation. I have copies of that here if you don't have a copy, and we'll have that. I'll have Mr. Jumbo distribute that to our council delegates. This is our guide, and there are some implementation areas that we have been working on in getting that new amended plan of operation off the ground, which included by September bringing on more ASC staff. And as you know, the hiring process with the Navajo Nation takes some time. So we have not had a full ASC staff until just 2 months ago. So if you can imagine that, since August 22nd, 2018, to just 2 months ago, we did not have a full staff. In October, there was some orientation done to the chapters about the amendments to the plan of operation. And one of the things that's in the plan of operation, which is on another handout that I did already share with some delegates, is what is called the direct local supervisor. And some of the chapters are still implementing this and learning this and understanding this piece of the plan of operation. As we got to election season, the transition at ASC came to a little standstill, but after inauguration and we got all of our new council delegates in place and our new division director came in, we started to have strategic planning to bring the ASC into the full scope of the Division of Community Development. So on the next slide for February 2019, ASC made a transition to working fully with the Division of Community Development, and with the leadership of Dr. Yellowman, she was able to really bring everyone, all of our departments together. In the research I was doing for strategic planning, many of the departments prior to this were functioning independently, and there was not very much coordinated efforts. But since we began with a new division director and having our new RDC leadership in place, we've been able to move forward with strategic planning through our budget preparation, and then also with the strategic plans from the Office of the President and Vice President. Many of the issues and concerns that have been brought up about ASC over the years are a part of the strategic planning process. By June 2019, we were able to get more staff hired at the ASC level. For some time, we had some of our SPPS staff managing two regional sites, and that was a lot. That was over 30 chapters for each person to manage. So until we got all of our SPPS staff hired, which was 2 months ago, we now have 8 senior programs and project specialists on board now to help all 110 chapters. And that just happened a couple of months ago. Through strategic planning with our ASC staff, we've been able to address some of the operational concerns, and we've been coming together more as a team to address our staffing issues and fill our staffing needs, and then also to address some of the improvement areas. So as of September, I was delegated as the new ASC department manager, and I've been working closely with our ASC staff. I've been also meeting with many council delegates as well as chapter officials, and also addressing employee concerns through our CSCs and our AMS staff. On the next slide, some of our council delegates were not aware that we have 8 service areas. Some of our council delegates were still under the impression that we had 5 agencies, but we don't. We have 8 service areas, and 8 of our SPPS staff oversee a number of chapters. For our Baca service area, Mr. Casey Begay oversees 14 chapters. For our Chinle service area, Ms. Edgerton Jean oversees 16 chapters. For Crown Point service area, Ms. Sharon Jackson oversees 18 chapters. In our Delcon service area, Ms. Eunice Begay, she oversees 9 chapters. And for our Fort Defiance area, Patricia Begay, she oversees 18 chapters. For our Kayenta service area, Mr. Calvin Sosi, he oversees 7 chapters. And for Shiprock Service Area, Miss Elizabeth Washburn, she oversees 20 chapters. And then for Tuba City, Mr. Milford Maloney, he oversees 8 chapters. And you can see the certified chapters under that. Their staff at each service area is comprised of 3. That's the SPPS, the ASO, and the OS. Some of our staff help other service areas, and some of them are assigned to assist with special projects. So our ASC offices in the regions, they a lot of times are spread very thin. On the next slide, regarding chapter operations, they're at each chapter with our new amended plan of operation. Our chapter officials have been given the responsibility to be the direct local supervisor. And direct local supervision means that the chapter official will ensure that the CSC is carrying out the day-to-day duties and responsibilities. Many of our delegates that I've spoke with and other chapter officials were not aware of this. Either they missed the orientation or they didn't understand this process. But the direct local supervisor is one of the chapter officials. And that chapter official is the supervisor who addresses personnel issues and personnel concerns at the chapter. If the chapter officials do not want that responsibility, then they give that responsibility to our senior program and project specialists. As you can imagine, when you're dealing with personnel issues, personnel problems, you have to be a good supervisor. You have to know your supervisory responsibilities. You have to know the personnel policy manual. And so we do tend to run into a lot of problems because our chapter officials are not aware of some of the supervisory policies, even though they've been provided the training. A lot of times it takes practice. And sometimes our SPPS staff are out in the field at other chapters, so they cannot manage a chapter every day. So there's a lot of remote supervision. Our chapter employees consist of the CSC, and that CSC is the supervisor of the accounts maintenance specialist, the AMS, and the PEP workers. One of the other things that I'd like to clarify is we really cannot have chapter officials supervising an AMS. By law, that would be inappropriate because we have to have a separation of duties, a segregation of duties, so it's not appropriate for chapter officials to supervise an AMS because of the funds. So that's another clarification that we have to make, and that helps us understand the chapter operations and the roles and responsibilities. On the next slide for the direct local supervisor, I'm not sure if we have it on there. If you go back on a slide. One more. Okay, go ahead and move forward. So the chapter discord. Dr. Yellowman and I have been meeting with many chapter officials, chapter staff, and working in our Navajo Nation chapter unit from DOJ. And we come in and we try to provide some intervention and guidance regarding chapter discord. And I know I've spoke with many of our delegates. That chapter discord really stalls many of our operations at the chapters. We get our SPPS staff involved to try to mitigate and investigate some of the discord. The discord could be between the chapter officials, the 3 chapter officials not working together. The discord could be between chapter officials and the chapter CSC or manager. The discord could be between the chapter officials and the accounts maintenance specialists, or it could be discord among the community and the chapter. And so we try to intervene and address some of that discord, but it gets very complicated. And because of that, we end up having some situations in terms of chapter staff turnover, some staff leave. We also have grievances that we have to mitigate, and sometimes those grievances delay hiring of new staff. We tend to go out there, and I will be honest, some of these situations can be dangerous because our community members are having intense discord. And so we try to do our best to do some intervention and peacemaking. And that I've expressed to several council delegates. We need your leadership. We need your help to speak to our people to work together in a constructive way. The next, last slide I want to share is just an update on our 45 certified chapters. Currently, the 45 certified chapters pretty much run independently. The only time we get involved is when they need our help, when they ask for technical assistance, or if they have discord that they're trying to resolve and need some guidance and assistance. But for the most part, our 45 certified chapters are operating on their own FMS process, FMS manual, and we work closely with our DOJ chapter unit to advise them on any of the challenges or legal issues that they have to address at their certified chapter. I think that's the last slide. Already covered this one and already covered that one. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jumbo so he can explain how this all relates to the sanctions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members of RDC. I do have a separate PowerPoint here. It didn't get included in this overall PowerPoint that you're seeing before you today. Okay. So the first part I'll go over is there's two separate PowerPoints. The first one's regarding corrective action plan and sanction chapters. Once we get that on the screen here. We didn't get a chance to make copies, but we'll get copies to you distributed. Like I mentioned before, I've been reassigned to help the division DCD on cap and sanction chapters. So I've been, it's in its infancy as well. So been with my auditing experience. So just to go over a summary, next slide here. Summary of chapters. There are currently 10 sanctioned chapters, 2 chapters that have a sanction delayed pending an Auditor General revisit, and 8 that are on corrective action plan implementation. So they're currently implementing their corrective action plan at their chapters, 8 of the chapters. And 5 are going through cap development. So they've recently been audited and they're going through their cap, and you just heard one the other day that went through the committee. Oljeto is one of the 5. Ongoing audits, we have 3 ongoing audits, Standing Rock, Tohatchee, and Indian Wells, those 3 chapters there. So the chapters that have been assessed to date are Hard Rock chapter, Manuelito chapter, Twin Lakes chapter, White Cone, Kaibito, and White Horse Lake. So those are the dates that the assessments were completed. Going first into Hard Rock chapter in a little bit more detail. ASC Chinle office, we were able to assess them on June 20th, 2019. Audit issues that this chapter had was 15. So the chapter was, they had developed a corrective action plan, and they are in the process of implementing this corrective action plan. So with that assessment, there have been gradual improvements that have been made. Some of those improvements with the assistance of the ASC Chinle office. And recently, we just had a CSC applicant selected, so pending their background check clearance. So with this will greatly help this chapter implement their segregation of duties, as well as making sure that those segregation of duties fall in line with their corrective action plan. So with that, ASC will continually do on-site visits with this chapter. The next one, Manuelito chapter. there was an assessment conducted back in August 15th, 2019. There's 8 audit issues relating to this chapter. Again, back in August was when the corrective action plan was approved by Budget and Finance, which is the final approval. And with that assessment that was completed back in August, there are ongoing issues relating to their corrective action plan. So those will be resolved in working with the Fort Defiance ASC office. And again, there'll be on-site visits that will be regularly scheduled with Manuelito chapter as well. Twin Lakes chapter, the assessment was completed back on September 13th. There's 24 audit issues. This is one of the sanctioned chapters, one of the 10 sanctioned chapters. So right now they're currently having 10% of the operating withheld as well as 20% of the stipends currently being withheld. This chapter was sanctioned back in March of 2016 by the Budget and Finance Committee. So with this assessment, there's still ongoing operation issues relating to their cap. So with the Crown Point ASC office, they'll be providing technical assistance in making these corrections. And with that, there's also a CSC that has been recently selected pending their background clearance, and this will help in segregation of duties as well with their corrective action plan. And Crown Point office has been regularly meeting with the Twin Lakes chapter and getting those deficiencies resolved. So, and they're due for a follow-up visit next year, which you'll see in the corresponding slide. The next one, White Cone chapter. There was an assessment completed on September 16, 2019. There's 8 audit issues which all relate to cash receipts process of the FMS, and they are currently sanctioned since December 2018. So they have the 10 and 20% withheld. So there's still ongoing issues based on this last assessment relating to the cash receipts audit deficiencies. So with that, they'll be working with Delcon ASC and resolving those issues. The main hindrance for this chapter is the involvement of the chapter officials. The chapter officials aren't doing the monitoring component, which is really holding this chapter back. So with that, the CSC was the only one there for quite a bit. So the AMS is fairly new at that chapter as well, but so that'll allow the CSC to closely monitor the work of the AMS. And Delcon office, again, has scheduled visits to work with White Cone chapter. Kaibito, this is one of the chapters that has the sanction delayed with Budget and Finance. An assessment was completed September 30th, 2019, working with the Kienta ASC office. They're officially under Tuba City, but Kienta office has been working fairly close with Kaibito. There's 3 overall audit issues. Again, the corrective action plan is there and it's being implemented. So vast improvements have been made with the operations for this chapter with the ASC Kienta office assistant. So Kienta office is scheduling regular visits with this chapter, and the OAG revisit was scheduled to be November 15th of this year, so that's coming up next month. And with the chapter president, he agreed to stay with the OAG schedule, so that'll be until November 15th. And then they'll be going before Budget and Finance to see if they sanction or is a go or not. So that'll be during December. But right now, all corrective measures are in place for this chapter. So we're hoping to avoid sanction with this one. So, but we'll see. We'll make sure by November. The latest one that was assessed was earlier this week, which is White Horse Lake. Again, this chapter is under the Crown Point ASC area. The assessment was completed October 15th. There are 24 audit issues. They are also a sanctioned chapter. The 10 and 20% are withheld. With White Horse Lake, they've been sanctioned since October 2016. So improvements, there have been improvements made with the operations with the assistance of Crown Point ASC. And the administration, they're working on the remaining deficiencies. So ASC Crown Point will has regular site visits scheduled with this chapter as well. Their timeline initially before RDC during the August 20th meeting was January 2020, but based on this recent assessment that was completed, that timeline is going to be pushed forward to March 31st, 2020. So we did inform the White Horse Lake chapter of that, and they're willing to push their timeline forward. So they'll be reporting to you here soon on that timeline, updated timeline. So the remaining upcoming assessments, we do have a vast number of them. The next one that will be coming up is next week, Sanasti chapter, followed by Isnasbus, Sawmill, Alamo, Rama, White Cone, Crystal, Loop, going into December, and then into next year, starting with Mariana Lake, which is a sanctioned chapter, again, Twin Lakes, Church Rock, Tahajale, Heart Rock, Pueblo Pintado, Manuelito, Tseyato, and then going into March, Nahadishkish, Smith Lake, Lakajigay, Oljeto, Round Rock, Baca Pruitt, and Red Mesa. So that's the upcoming assessment schedules. The common deficiencies that we're seeing is either they're lacking the one staff, or in some cases they might not have staff, in the case of a CSC or AMS. And the main challenge is the record system. The record system is not really, it's not really there for some of these chapters. And this is a thing that should be done on a daily basis. As soon as they print out a check, all those documents should be filed away. But one thing a lot of these chapters are tending to do is they're saying, oh, we hired a temporary worker, an office assistant or office specialist, and they didn't file it correctly, is what tends to be the blame, the excuse. That shouldn't be the case. So we're telling these chapters is, well, as a CSC or AMS, you're supervising these staff, these temporary workers. So you should be monitoring their work they're making, and then if they have any questions, you should be encouraging them to have them ask you questions to where they can file these records. That way it's filed correctly. In the case of White Horse Lake, I mean, they were able to pull these records right away, which was a good thing. That's what we should be seeing at all these chapters. But that's an ongoing issue, even coming from the audit side. The common audit deficiencies, travel, procurement, and property, those are the three common audit issues that you'll see across all 110 chapters. And those tend to be what you call the high-risk areas. So no matter what, we'll be seeing those type of, like Oljeto, you had travel and property. Those are the two common audit issues. So that'll be, if anything, that'll be in a policy fix or even a legislative fix will be needed for those particular areas, because a lot of chapters are struggling with those those three areas. Personnel is another big area, which we're working with DPM as well. So that'll be addressed moving forward. We also have another PowerPoint presentation relating to some recommendations relating to the sanction recommendations. Pat, if you can. Oh, the teams. Oh, okay. So in working on these CAP and sanction assessments, right now it's myself and Brenda Holgate that are working with the area offices, the 8 ASC sites. So depending on which chapter we're assessing, we're working like White Horse Lake was Crown Point, and the next one is Sanasti and Tisnaspas, which both fall under Shiprock's ASC office. So we are working with those ASC offices, the SPPSs and the ASOs, and getting these assessments completed. And on top of that, that'll give the ASOs for those site offices a better idea of what they need to start reviewing. We're actually supposed to have an ASO training today and tomorrow, but due to this RDC meeting, that was canceled. So, but that's going to be coming up. I don't know how soon. So that'll be a great learning tool for these ASOs, because coming into Chinle ASC, working with the SPPS, Egerton Jean, she's also coming from a chapter background. We were able to develop templates that assisted us in conducting these monthly reviews as well as these on-site visits. And that's one thing I've shared with these ASOs, and these ASOs really like those templates, and some of them actually started using these templates, and it's really straightforward. And I mean, it's similar to the audit side, but that's what should be verified from the ASC side as well. So, and making sure that eventually we're going to have clean audits is our overall goal. I mean, we're just going to have like one or two findings like Oljeto, just one or two findings, and that'll be it. And we'll be able to make these corrections right away, as opposed to having chapters become sanctioned. Case in point on sanctions, Sawmill chapter sanctioned since 2003, and they're still sanctioned, and we're in 2019. And they have a good, healthy savings account up here. Last I looked at it, it's coming up on $500,000. That includes their operation and stipends. So that's, but we don't want chapters being like that. So that's one thing we want to prevent. So with the set recommendations, recommendation 1 is relating to the one master MIP contract. So right now, we're in the process of developing an RFQ, which is assigned to one of the SPPSs here, to solicit a qualified vendor for Abila MIP fund accounting software. Currently, we have 109 chapters on Abila MIP. Only one chapter is using another accounting software, which is working for them for now, but eventually we would like to see all 110 chapters on one uniform accounting system. So the plan there is to solicit the vendor, a qualified vendor, and do a master contract for all 110 chapters for service, maintenance, and support through a professional service contract with the vendor and Abila, which is the creator of the MIP software. So with that, the vendor must comply with applicable Navajo Nation laws, and then implement software security features to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, including mismanagement of Navajo Nation funds. Notice the word there is reduce. You can never eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. You can only minimize it. So just keep that in mind. And ASC should be given real-time access, meaning MIP administrative rights and remote access to MIP at each of the 8 ASC offices and DCD executive team. Currently, we just have one license. I'm actually carrying that laptop with me here today, and we're having to share that among the 8 sites. So, but when we can, but we need the 8 licenses for all the area offices so we can be able to review those MIP backups on a timely basis. And also develop a step-by-step guidance manual for MIP users. There is kind of a manual there, but that needs to be updated and more comprehensive. And develop and implement uniform MIP training for chapter administration officials, ASC staff, and DCD executive team. So some of the ASC sites, they are providing a MIP training to some extent, but we like to get it under one umbrella and uniform that to where all the same information is disseminated to all 110 chapters for the MIP software. Also, consistent quarterly user group training for chapter administration officials, ASC staff, and DCD executive team. So eventually we'll be talking about the same subject matters for the MIP software. So, and with the security features, I mean, that will be a great help. It is there now, but it's inactive. So like, let's say they're gonna print a check for a budget line item that's in a negative, or they have no more money left. They wouldn't be able to do that if we were able to activate that security feature. And then one security feature that's also in there is a notification feature that will alert the ASC site office, even all the way up to the division executive team, that will allow them to, even all the way up to the chapter officials and possibly the council delegates, saying, hey, this chapter is trying to process this check when they have no more money available in there, or they process a check that's over $1,000. So that will notify the applicable stakeholders and getting them right away say, hey, we need to get out to this chapter and prevent them from either stop payment on that check or see if that check is actually a legitimate payment. So that's one of the features that will be in there that can be activated. Another thing too is another feature called Advanced Security Module that will allow the chapters to expend the fund, like summer youth is only for temporary employment for student workers. So that will set the accounts to only those personnel line items and nothing beyond that. So just an example there. Recommendation 2, increase ASC monitoring status. Again, ASC has been in operation since fiscal year 2016, but it's never really had a identity. And it's I've seen the changes that they've gone through and the struggles that they've gone through coming from the audit side as well. So with that, place chapters that have not implemented their cap on monitoring status with the Office of the Controller. That has been done back in 2003. Rough Rock chapter was one of the chapters that was placed on monitoring status with the Office of the Controller rather than being sanctioned. So with that, they've had to go through the typical process that a Navajo Nation program has to go through in processing their paperwork with the Office of the Controller. They were able to do it for a good while. They struggled, but they were able to do it. And for about a good 12 years, they've been on that monitoring status. Back in the late part of 2015 is when they were removed from that monitoring status. So they're currently managing their chapter funds now. And there's, unfortunately with that, there's been some conflicts that have been coming up with that chapter, but those have been resolved gradually. So those have been resolved. But rather than sanction, I mean, why not just put them under a monitoring status? Have them get that full experience of what it is to actually go through the proper process in processing these paperwork from any type of disbursements, from payroll, procurement. Even with procurement, they had to go through the purchasing section with Controller's Office, and especially with contracts, that'll give them more direct training and going through the proper 164 process. Even with personnel, they had to deal with DPM. DPM is going to make sure that all those required documents are on file before they can even hire those temporary workers. And that's maintained through their HRIS system with personnel. So chapter funds will be monitored through OOC, through FMIS, and then personnel again by DPM. And chapter will be required to submit all required documentation to Window Rock to process paperwork. And chapter will be removed from monitoring status until audit issues are deemed resolved by OAG. So they'll just make sure that they're on the proper path and they can't make any more shortcuts than what they're doing if it was managed there locally at the chapter. So that's one of the recommendations. The last recommendation is Administrative Service Center Additional Authority. SPPS and ASO should closely monitor the financial status of the chapter consistently. With that ASO training again that was supposed to be today and tomorrow, that would have helped greatly in this area, but we'll be increasing that. SPPS ASO should resolve audit findings administratively before an OAG revisit and Navajo Nation Council committee action. So that's a goal that will be that will take a while, but eventually we will get there. And now that we're fully staffed. Next one, ASC staff should monitor MIP backups on monthly and quarterly basis. This is a really good recommendation. I'm always going to use Chinle as an example. With Chinle, we've been monitoring the monthly finances as best as I could with fiscal year 19, and with the closeouts that we've done with fiscal year 19, the way Chinle approached it, we did it in great detail than what the consultant ITG New Mexico would do. So with that detail, we did a lot of the chapters like that because we were able to find out where those errors, those journal entries needed to be corrected in their MIP systems. And that we were able to correct it right then and there with them with these work sessions we had with those chapters, with the Chinle area chapters. So they really appreciated that. And with this monthly monitoring, we'll be able to catch it within that particular month and correct it right then and there. That way, when we come out to future fiscal year closeouts, it'll be able to be a lot smoother. In the case, I also helped the Kayenta office, and 5 of their chapters was just done right away. We were able to just get them done right away. With the remaining 2, they had quite a bit of issues, but we were able to get those resolved. So it becomes an audit issue when OAG comes in. So that's a preventative measure that we're planning to implement, that we are going to implement and prevent these audit issues from coming before the committees. So that's one thing we want to do. ASC staff should assist chapter in developing CAP and implement CAP to resolve financial discrepancies. So based on those non-compliance notices, we're going to have the chapters develop a CAP and resolve those deficiencies right off the back. And audits, ASC staff should conduct an exit report with chapter officials on the CAP. So formalizing that CAP with the chapter officials. So that's one thing. We are implementing, some of the sites are implementing it, but we just need to make it more uniform among all 8 sites. So there is a lot that we are doing as ASC now that we are fully staffed, and we do have actually other ASOs that are also former auditors, so they do have an understanding of how to look at the finances. So we do have the knowledge, skills, and expertise there. We just need to vamp up what ASC needs to do. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just add to this and give some time to our chapter unit with DOJ, to Mr. Roderick Begay, because we work closely with them regarding some of these issues and legal questions that come up regarding the FMS manuals and the questions that come up from the Auditor General. So I'd like to give some time to Mr. Begay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and the people here in the audience. We started the chapter unit through the collaboration between Dr. Yellerman and A.G. McPaul, and we started here in early August. And one of the things we tried to do immediately was address the backlog and the amount of legal questions, legal services being provided to chapters, and then also providing presentations. I guess my background, I came to DOJ in 2005. I was immediately assigned to assist chapters. So I learned a lot about municipal corporations and the different type of local governance that are out there in the world. And so I worked with chapters for a couple years before going to the judicial branch, and then upon returning back to DOJ in 2013, I was again assisting chapters again. And so with that background, starting a chapter unit, it was something that was contemplated for many, many, many years. And so the realization that, when council passed the Local Governance Act in 1998, there were delegations of authority, planned delegations of authority to chapters. And so the idea of decentralizing many of Window-Rock's duties onto chapters, and I think that when you learn the history of the chapter governance and everything, begin to realize what a monumental task council put onto chapter governments, and then to try to navigate and develop all of these policies, was such a monumental task. So right now we only have 45 governance certified chapters. 21 years later after the LGA, a majority of chapters are not governance certified. And so, when you look at experience and you look at the audits that chapters are adhered to, and in 1998, the entire Navajo Nation government, all 3 branches of government, were required to assist chapters in the implementation of the Local Governance Act. But we didn't do that. I think we tried to develop a template 5 management system, which really is not adequate. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is beef up that 5 management system because, I could take, the 5 management system. One example is personnel. And if you look at the template 5 management system for personnel, it's basically a carbon copy of the DPM personnel policies. But it doesn't provide any guidance to chapters about how to run their own human resource department. And so there needs to be additional policies. And so that's the type of services that we're concentrating on in terms of developing this 5 management system. How do we truly delegate these duties and powers from Central Navajo onto chapters, and with the expectation that they'll be good at it, and I think we need to develop those policies for them, at least template versions, and then they can expand those policies from there. But the chapter unit, I think, we feel that that's a monumental task. The Central Navajo has Office of Legislative Counsel, DOJ, Judicial Branch has staff attorneys and also attorneys at the central level. And you have a 2-person unit at DOJ, 4 chapters, and it's like having 110 mini Winderocks out there. And so you have only two attorneys trying to assist them with a development of their own little 3-branch government there at the local level. So again, I think it's a monumental task, but hopefully with my experience and my background, I can facilitate and address a lot of the issues that surround chapters. And I think that's pretty much, what our unit has been concentrating, in our third month of operation here. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Nanda, I think we need to ask some questions, Nanda. Roshin chepin the hall koron hiln dan so lash na das kit. Honorable Begay, and then Honorable Stewart and Honorable Walker. So.
Okay. Here had oleh kado. Hilnada soslnagi. ASC. I wish we had a full day discussing on this particular